Hey guys, welcome to Speech Bubble. Butch and Jace in an unknown location with the amazing animation Disney producer, Mr. Don Hahn.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here on Speech Bubble, and I just like saying Speech Bubble. Hope you enjoy my clever and witty interview right here on Speech Bubble.
Speech Bubble. We'll just say Speech Bubble ourselves. That Speech Bubble.
Speech Bubble.
Here's the deal. We sound a bit echoey, and here's why. We haven't gotten the money to build our own studio yet, so we're not like in our own soundstage at all. But we might as well be in a soundstage.
It's cooler than a soundstage, I'll tell you that.
It is. We're in the home slash secret lair. Is it a lair?
It is a lair, yeah. Definitely a lair. Clubhouse, whatever.
Like a headquarters, I guess.
Yeah, dressing room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're in the home of, I guess the word legendary totally applies. Legendary producer for Disney, Don Hahn. Hey, Don, how's it going?
Really good. Good to have you guys here.
Well, thank you. In fact, what's great about you, Don, you let us use your microphones and your lights, so thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for that.
And my food, too. I wish you guys would eat before you came.
You will be making us lunch before we get out of here.
Yeah, no, we've got some ham sandwiches and stuff.
Oh, that's excellent. Nice. Good. I hate ham, but it's fine. All right, so, hey, man, thanks for letting us come over.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Normally, we have guests come into our studio, but our studio is like a little box with blue walls. And, you know, it's kind of, we've been there, done that, Don.
Yeah.
And we're just glad to have, now, Don's invited us to a secret lair. Am I allowed to say the city that we're in?
No.
Okay, not the city.
It's on the West Coast.
It's on the West Coast.
In Los Angeles.
It's in California, and that's all I'm allowed to say. But if you guys, now, we are recording this for YouTube.
We're orbiting right now, actually.
That's right.
It's an orbiting.
We are, but he could turn the air off at any time. So just be careful. Exactly. But we're here inside this amazing, I guess I'm going to describe, it's a studio, right?
Yeah.
Your art studio.
Yeah, it was, I've been here, we use this as my office, and I got it about 10 years ago. It was built as an art studio. So it was built in 1908, which is really unusual for California. So it has really great old kind of arts and crafts architecture, and it's not fancy, it's kind of a barn, but it's just a great place with a lot of natural light, and we can come here and make documentaries and make movies and paint and do whatever we want to.
So it's really a home away from home for you.
Yeah, it is.
So you must be married.
I am.
I am too, and I have a home away from home. It's called my office off my bedroom. That's what I have. Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah. Well, this is really awesome, man. If I can just paint a picture for our audience a little bit, because we do this on YouTube and we do the audio as well.
Yeah, great.
Those of you on audio, if you can imagine sort of a 1930s-ish sort of a bungalow type of thing. It's 2 stories, kind of I would call it like almost like a hunting lodge. It's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, a little bit. There's a big fireplace, and there's some animal sacrifice going on.
Yeah, exactly, of course.
Yeah,
But just the trinkets that you have. You have everything in here from Disney memorabilia, and I'm not talking stuff you can buy at Disneyland. This is stuff like only someone from the studio would have.
Right.
So you've stolen stuff from the studio, which is
have.
great. Yeah, exactly. Well, over there's a Lion King sculpture I can see over there.
Yes.
Is that a maquette from?
That's a maquette from the movie of Mufasa, and that's Thurl Ravenscroft from the Haunted Mansion next to.
Oh wow, yeah.
From the Haunted Mansion movie, actually.
That's actually his head. Is that a bust of his head?
It is. It is. Rick Baker sculpted that. So that's.
The living ghosts come out to social love.
Yeah, I love that.
From Haunted Mansion.
50 years old this year.
That's
Haunted
right.
Mansion's 50 years old?
Yeah, no joke.
Oh my
Isn't that
gosh.
amazing?
1969.
Yeah.
My favorite ride at Disneyland.
Yeah, me too.
Still to this day.
It's great, and you think those guys were so ahead of their time, because we take for granted, because we grew up with the doom buggies and but the technology and the Pepper's Ghost effects and everything else that's in that attraction is just amazing.
It's still magical. Like you still don't understand how half the things work.
Totally so.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's so simple. They use things as simple as reflections to make you think there's ghosts in the room. When I found that out at age like 30, I'm like, oh my god.
I know.
Now, how do you acquire some of this stuff? Because I feel like it belongs in the Disney archives.
Other than theft, how did you acquire it?
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's why I don't disclose where the studio is.
Exactly.
I'm afraid of law enforcement.
For good reason.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't know how much of it was really intentional. It's just I slowly started surrounding myself with things I love, and I think we all do that to a degree. So, like whenever I travel, I buy a clock. So a lot of these but it has to be hand wound. It can't be electrical. And so there's little clocks, and it's not expensive, and it's not like a hobby. I just ended up buying clocks everywhere, but they have memories to them. So there's my mom's vacuum cleaner and my.
I love that. It's an Electrolux vacuum that you've seen in every 50s cartoon.
Everyone.
It looks like a spaceship.
It looks, and
really
it's
does.
Beautifully designed, and my grandpa's saw and my dad's snowshoes, and it's just things like that. It's not that they speak to me or have any mystical power. It's just comfortable. It's like working out of my garage almost, you know. So it has that feeling to it. And I was a music major in college, so I have a lot of musical instruments around because I love that. And it's just a really comfortable place to come, and it's quiet, and we get a lot of work done here.
And everybody I know that's in at least associated with animation has a house similar to this.
Yeah.
Just knickknacks. Because when you start making money in animation and can afford to like buy stuff, you go like, I can buy these really nice maquettes now. I can buy these. Look, a Superman figure that costs $1,000. I can buy this now.
It's totally true. Other people are out buying Mercedes-Benzes and things that we're out buying.
Or investing their money.
Their money, which would be foolish.
But do you feel like it fuels your creativity when you're surrounded by this kind of stuff?
I guess it does in retrospect, yeah, because it's just a sense of comfort, and there's there's like no negative voice in here. So it's really comfortable for me, and we've made just a lot of movies here. We made Waking Sleeping Beauty here.
Oh yeah.
And we made
right in this room. This is your you make the documentaries in this room. Very.
We've worked on some of the Disney nature movies here. We're working on a project for Epcot Center right now. So it's just a place that's quiet. The phone doesn't ring. And we just get a lot done.
This place was built before phones were invented, actually. It's right
true.
around the time, I think.
It's true. Yeah, there were no phones. There were almost no cars when it was invented.
Amazing, man.
So it really was about the fireplace and about coming here and doing art and painting.
Yeah, so cool. Let's go back in time, in the time machine, in the speech bubble time machine. We'll go back. So but we're going to get into all the millions of things, and there are millions of things that you've done. But where can we start? Like, where were you born? Were you born in California?
Wow, no, I was born in Chicago. But when I was 3 years old, we moved out here. My dad was a Lutheran minister, and he took a church out in Bellflower in the San Gabriel Valley. So in 1959, 1960, we moved out there. So I grew up, Bellflower, Downey, Long Beach, that kind of area.
Okay, gotcha.
And I felt really lucky. Like in retrospect, I feel really lucky to have grown up in Southern California during that era because it was amazing optimism. Families, soldiers returning from World War II, and dairy cows and all the necessities of life. And Disneyland. And then like I remember one night waking up and looking out. There was a big truck going by about 4 a.m, and it was a piece of the Saturn V rocket going down to McDonnell Douglas. And you just go, oh yeah, that's just what happens.
That's where I live. This is where I live.
Yeah. So so I grew up around here, and later moved up to North Hollywood with my family and folks, and that's kind of what got me plugged into Disney because I was always interested I was always a Disney geek, as we all are, interested in music and art, and majored in music and art in school. But when I was 20, I got a job at Disney and just like making coffee for people. But the people were like Wooly Reitherman and Ward Kimball and
the 9 Old Men.
9 Old Men.
I was going to say, man.
Mark
Davis? Was Mark Davis?
Mark Davis had gone to Imagineering by that time.
Okay.
But I don't know if I really appreciated at the time, but those were my teachers. So I worked for Wooly for a couple of years.
What year was this you got the job at Disney?
76.
Wow, 76.
76. So they were all there.
The Ron Miller era.
The Ron Miller era.
Yeah.
And he was in charge. We were making movies that maybe weren't that great. It was kind of Black Cauldron time.
Now, when I got to Cal, I was going to say, you and I met 30 years ago, or almost 36 years ago.
Wow.
I was a snot-nosed kid out of Michigan. I just got to Cal Arts, and I was in my first year. And at the end of the year, they picked 2 students to have an internship at Disney. It was me and a guy named Brett Holland.
Yeah,
I think they picked us because we had the same initials, Butch Hartman and Brett Holland.
No.
But we ended up going to. I thought, oh my gosh, we got to go to Disney Studios for a month and do a film. A student film, and like to animate a film in a month, and they picked me and Brett, and so I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go to Disney Studios for a month, but they had just moved the animators from the main studio to Flower Street in Glendale, but it was magical because like Brett and I were like shoved into a room, and you guys were so nice to us, but you were developing Roger Rabbit because there were some guys animating test footage then.
Right.
The Great Mouse Detective was being worked on.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff, but Black Cauldron was the big movie.
Yeah. Was Eric still there? Eric Larson?
Eric was there, and I met him a couple times.
Great.
And he was there. I did meet him a couple. Now that you mention it, and then I can't find the film. It was shot on 35 millimeter, and it was like a 2-minute pencil test that we did. And there's no way. I know I have it somewhere, but I can't find it.
We have to find that for you.
We have.
Yeah.
I don't know where we'll find it.
I bet it's in here.
It's probably in this room.
It is. Actually, I have it. It's over in the men's room over here.
Yeah.
Perfect. No, but we did meet, but you'd been at Disney for about 10 years at that point, or 8 years at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I was production managing. I drew for a while.
So you were an artist. You went in as an artist as well?
After I was a PA for a while and running around, I really wanted to get into the art. And I worked with Don Bluth for a while on Peace Dragon, and loved Don and loved his work aesthetic and all that stuff. So I was his assistant, not assistant animator, but in his room, handling his dry cleaning and stuff like that. And I wanted to really get into animation, so I in between for a while for Andy Gaskell and Glenn Keane and some of those guys. And I knew right away that I wasn't going to be Glenn Keane. I wasn't.
I think we all learned very quickly.
It's a universal statement, yeah. So I kind of migrated towards working with people, and I love the idea of helping artists get their job done. And yet I have a real appreciation for how damn hard it is to do anything. To do anything, to paint, to draw, to whatever.
And you had guys at the studio probably there till 2-3 in the morning. Doing stuff, and then sleeping there, and then getting up at 6 and starting work again.
It's an all, as you know more than anybody, it's a consuming sport, this animation thing.
It is.
But I love it. I just love it, and got really seduced by it back then.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to hang around with like Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston and Wooly and all these people that were kind of tacit tutors to all of us. And I came in about the same time as Ron Clements and John Musker and Tim Burton and Brad Bird and all those guys.
Yeah.
So we were kind of the new generation coming in.
Very cool. And so so you guys were doing Roger Rabbit back then, The Great Mouse Detective, and I remember there was a lot of cynicism from a lot of diehard Disney guys. I mean, these are guys in their 20s back then, but oh my gosh, I can't believe they're making The Great Mouse Detective. They're calling it The Great Mouse Detective. And but then a guy named I'm forgetting his name. The guy who produced Little Mermaid. What's the name? I forgot.
Howard Ashman.
No. Him and he started DreamWorks. Jeffrey Katzenberg. I should have known this, of course. But Jeffrey Katzenberg comes in, and then
block it out.
We're all blocking it out. No, but Jeffrey Katzenberg comes in and says, "Hey, let's make Little Mermaid," and things kind of take off in a different way at that point.
Well, yeah, they really did. I mean,
But Michael Eisner comes in too.
Yeah, 1984 was like a big change. Michael Eisner, Frank Wells comes in, brings Jeffrey Katzenberg with. I don't think Jeffrey cared about animation at all. Roy Disney was kind of given the animation department and said, you go play with these guys in Glendale. We'll get back to you after we make our Bette Midler movie or whatever. Right. And it just took off like a gasoline fire. And Jeffrey got really seduced by the process. And there's a couple people that were really responsible for that time, and he was one of them. He really pushed us hard, and sometimes uncomfortably so. But he and Howard Ashman, who came in and produced and wrote lyrics, and Howard brought Aladdin into the studio to work with Ron and John on. So that time, and we didn't know it at the time, but it turned out to be a kind of, I guess people call it a renaissance now, of kind of our generation's chance to do some of this stuff.
Well, Beauty and the Beast came out of that too.
It did, yeah. Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King.
The big four, like those 4 in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, insane.
Yeah, and there's also like Rescuers Down Under is in there, which nobody ever talks about.
And I loved Rescuers Down Under.
It's a great movie full of great cinematography, and kind of the first digital movie in Hollywood is Rescuers Down Under. So
that and Tron. Tron had some digital stuff.
Tron had some digital stuff too, which you're right. Yeah. So that kind of hunger and the fear that animation was going to get closed, and the idea that like this is our only chance to do something kind of pushed us all into this spot. And I have to really point to Howard Ashman for teaching us a lot about how to tell stories in music and how to write songs that told plot, and kind of getting us exposed to that whole world of making musicals, which we didn't know.
And people forget, and I try and teach Jace on occasion. Jace is learning.
Which is very hard.
Very hard to do. No, but it's like not so much about the animation, which is great, but like it's all about the story. It's about characters that people can love and want to watch again. Because how many beautifully animated movies have there been that people have forgotten about because the story's wrong?
Man,
no one cares about the story.
Speak the truth. It's so deceiving, and you want to say it's all about the technique. It's all about the glorious images. But you think of a movie like Toy Story or any of those movies, you forget about the technique. When you're 5 minutes into it, you go like, the first Toy Story was such a breakthrough. Yeah. But you're into it after a while, and you're rooting for a cowboy and a spaceman, and it doesn't matter how it was made.
And your heart gets broken. Like when Buzz finds out he's a toy, you're like, oh my gosh, the poor guy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's those discoveries, and there's still discoveries we have to make today about every movie, are the ones that are important to hang on to, because there's every bell and whistle that exists now. You can do anything on the screen, which is an amazing era we live in. But the thing you can't do easily is get a connection with the audience and have an emotional empathy to the audience.
A perfect example, and this is, I've said this on Speech Bubble before, you hate when I say this, but the Star Wars movies, how they've changed Star Wars so much, that Star Wars was this movie, or this franchise with amazing characters, but now the new generation of quote-unquote Star Wars makers doesn't have that same talent. They have all the Star Wars pieces, but the connection with the audience, I think, for me, is just missing a lot.
Yeah, and some of that could be nostalgia, but I know what you mean, because it's like when Luke Skywalker's aunt and uncle died or something like that. You hardly knew the character, but you go, oh my God, this is his turning point of his life. He's going to be thrust into this adventure, and this is our Joseph Campbell moment. And you had this empathy for that character. And when movies work, no matter what movie it is, we go to movies to see what it is to be human.
Yeah, exactly.
And when movies work, that's why we love them so much.
Yeah, exactly. So you're doing all those movies, and you became a producer on those movies.
Yeah, the first movie I produced was Roger Rabbit. Oh man, this is such a long story.
Our audience wants to know, how do you become a producer, going from the assistant guy to being a producer? How do you do that?
Well, I was a production manager on Black Cauldron and Great Mouse Detective. And that was everything from running around with a clipboard to hiring people and working with artists. And I probably hired you at the time to come in and work on stuff. And I loved that. I thought that was great for me, because I'm a little attention deficit, and it was nice to be able to have that variety. Roger Rabbit, I had worked on Pete's Dragon, and so I knew kind of the animation live action combination stuff, and nobody else did, because the animation department had changed. Peter Schneider had come in by that time, Eisner, Wells. So Peter said, well, I'm going over to Amblin, come with me. And so I went over to Amblin, I sat down with Peter, and then Steven Spielberg walked in, and Bob Zemeckis walked in. And so, little Don Hahn from Bellflower sitting there going, hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. And just started working on it. And the thing about that is those guys are so not intimidating. They're 1,000% about the work and the story and the engagement. So they were my teachers too. I learned so much on that movie. So and then I went over and lived in London for 2 years and worked with Richard Williams. And I didn't know Dick. I knew his reputation.
One of the most talented animators of all time.
He's a genius, and I don't use that word lightly. He is a genius. And he had never really finished a movie. He had worked on.
That's true.
He'd worked on The Thief and the Cobbler for years.
Raggedy Ann and Andy.
Raggedy Ann and Andy. He got either fired or left or whatever. So he was notorious for being volatile and all that stuff. But I really liked the guy. And I think the other thing is he had a jazz band, and on the weekends he played Dixieland at the Grosvenor House Hotel. And I'm a drummer, so he always asked me to sit in when his drummer wasn't there. And I think that bonded us more than I know, because we were able to just play music, and it was nothing about it.
Jay, start taking drum lessons, right?
Okay, I'm on it.
Yeah.
There's drums right over there.
It's all about that.
Get going.
So anyway, that experience was great. It was challenging. It was impossible. We didn't know what we were doing. It was a really young crew, really international crew. We had people there that didn't speak English.
And that was a huge hit, Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, who knew?
Yeah, massive.
We didn't. There were times when we did test screenings, and we honestly did a test screening at Disney Studio where half the audience walked out.
Wow.
Because it was still pencil test, and
really?
At that time people didn't know what pencil tests were. We had to kind of educate the audience on that.
Right.
So they were going, what the hell is this? It's like this Invisible Man movie. I don't know what's going on. And they were like laughing at the screen and stuff.
Interesting.
So you never know. But it turned out okay.
Yeah, and Robert Zemeckis was on fire at that time. He just did Back to the Future, the first 3 movies. He does Roger Rabbit. He does all these other things. And then, of course, Spielberg was already massively gigantic at the time, too.
Yeah, Zemeckis is an amazing guy and just a really good writer and great storyteller. Everything's motivated by characters.
Well, the Back to the Future screenplay, considered now one of the best ones ever.
The best. Yeah.
With Roger Rabbit, what was the hardest part? Was it the pre-production, figuring out how you were going to put all this together, or was production while filming, after putting the animation in?
It was probably that while we were filming, we didn't know how we were going to do it.
Yeah.
So it was taking this leap of faith, which most of life is, and going in and shooting this literally Invisible Man movie. And we had all these rigs for Benny the Cab and for Hoskins to be thrown around, the actor that played Eddie Valiant.
Yeah.
And we just thought, well, we'll fix that later.
That's easy.
And the thing that Zemeckis wanted to do, and Richard also, was to interact with the environment a lot. So if the rabbit came in and put his hand on a chair and left, there'd be a mark in the dust where his glove was.
Oh, right.
So all that was rigged. We had great puppeteers from Henson Studios, and it was a place where they were just willing to do anything, but we had to pick up the pieces in animation then. So they wrapped, everybody went away, and they said, okay, and
here's your movie.
Here's your movie and a few $1 million.
And that first bit, isn't the first part of the movie like a 7-minute cartoon?
Yeah, completely. And we worked on the cartoon while they were shooting, and that was our way to kind of warm up to it. And Dick actually animated most of that cartoon himself.
God, that's some of the most amazing animation. That whole roller coaster sequence and all that.
It's great.
Yeah.
So we figured it out, obviously. It's very low tech. It's pre-computers. It was all kind of traditional Oxbury down shooters and you know, cells on a top light, backlight, flip-flop rig, so you would top light it, and then you'd turn on backlights and turn off the top lights to create its matte.
Wow.
And then that all went off to ILM. It was all shot VistaVision 8-perf, which is film turned sideways.
That's how movies were made, Jace. Back in the
Crazy,
day.
Yeah, it's actually
Sticks and
film.
bones.
It's a clear piece of plastic with silver on it.
With little holes in it.
Interesting.
We had stone tablets. So anyway, we figured it out, and it turned out great.
And then we know a lot of the same people. Kevin Lima and I went to school together.
Yeah.
Director of Enchanted and Tarzan.
Amazing guy.
Amazing guy. And then Kirk Wise, Beauty and the Beast, the first animated film to be nominated for an Academy Award.
Yep.
Him and Gary Trousdale. Then they move on to Hunchback. Then they move on to, what was it after that?
Atlantis. Yeah.
Now, can we talk about Atlantis for a second?
Yeah, you bet.
I know Atlantis was expected to be this massive thing because the movie was coming out, and I remember I knew a lot of people that were working on. There was a TV series that was started.
Yeah, true.
And then the TV series got stopped. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, boy, every film has great expectations.
Yes.
Hope springs eternal.
This
in the movie
podcast
business.
has great expectations.
And rightly so. So you go into it hoping for the best. And I'm proud of every movie I've worked on, but some resonate with the audience more than others.
Sure.
And that's just life.
Yeah.
There's some great work in it, and it's found its niche after all these years. Like Emperor's New Groove is another example of that. Like, people love that movie.
Now, let me ask you, was that a huge hit in the theater?
No, no, because people were used to these big Broadway musicals, and so it was a little head scratcher, I think, for people.
It's a little character piece.
It's a little character piece, and it's a simple story. You know, take a rich man and put him in a poor man's world. You know, put him in a homeless world.
Make him a llama too while we're at it.
Make him a llama while we're at it. So it's kind of a little Aesop fable almost. But if you're of a certain age, you know, like my daughter loves that movie. And,
yeah, my kids talk about it too.
And I'll go to Comic-Con and I'll say, well, yes, I did Lion King, and it's like, oh, well, that's nice. And then I say, well, I worked on Emperor's New Groove, and people come unglued.
They go.
Yeah. So you never know. And Atlantis was a little bit the same way. It has a following, which we're lucky for, but you just never know. Like Pinocchio was a bomb when it came out. It didn't do well. Fantasia didn't do well. And
I don't think Dumbo did well either, did it?
Dumbo did okay, but it was really low cost.
Yeah.
So the movies will find their audience eventually. Atlantis, we were just trying to do something different, and I really admire Kirk and Gary for this, because we brought in Mike Mignola, who does the Hellboy comic books, which we loved, and he styled the movie. And then we wanted to do a widescreen, which we hadn't done in a while, like a 2.35 ratio kind of movie. James Newton Howard doing the music. It was not a musical. It was full of explosions. And we just wanted to do an adventure movie like Journey to the Center of the Earth or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And those Jules Verne's movies were our kind of point of departure. And so it turned out great. It actually did well at the box office. It did like $100 million worth of business opening, but the previous movies had done $300 million worth of business. Sure. So it's like, how much...
And that was post Toy Story too, right? Toy Story had been out. So was everybody kind of? I know how executives think. Well, the CG movies are obviously, that's what people want to see. Let's start making those now.
They hadn't turned that corner yet, but they were starting to.
Yeah.
Disney was late to the game with computer graphics, if you remember, because Toy Story and Pixar were not part of the Walt Disney Company. They were their own entity with Steve Jobs, and so those Toy Story movies and Bug's Life were starting to come out, and Disney, in retrospect, should have done. I blame all of us, should have done Atlantis or Treasure Planet, should have been CG movies. But that didn't turn. We got to it late and started to do movies.
You didn't have the infrastructure for that.
Not at all. Yeah. Not at all. We had CAPS, which is kind of a sophisticated ink and paint system. Yeah. So Dinosaur was the first kind of CG movie we did.
Dinosaur, that's right. I remember Dinosaur.
Yeah. Yes. That was a huge investment in computers and capital, and that's back when a $50,000 computer was this huge doorstop of a thing that had less power than your cell phone.
Yeah. Right.
So anyway, Disney came a little late to that game, and those transitional movies, like if you look at Treasure Planet, which I didn't work on, but it's a great movie, but you see like Long John Silver with the CG arm that Glenn Keane animated, the character with a pencil, but then the CG thing is happening. Or in Beauty and the Beast, you'll see the ballroom built as a CG object.
Yes.
But everything else is hand done. So we were struggling with how much do you leave the Disney legacy behind?
Right.
And now, ironically, there's no pencil animation happening at Disney. Yeah. Which I don't think is by design.
There's nothing? There's not one thing?
I'm not close to Disney animation right now, so I don't know for sure.
Right.
And I know, I would guess that there's nothing against it as a technique. I just think a director or somebody has to come in with an idea that works really well.
Yeah, it's got to be the story.
Yeah.
go ahead.
with projects like you're saying Treasure Planet, and you didn't work on it, but it was at the studio at the time. So is it really collaborative? Like, do you get to see other people working on projects that you're not even working on yourself?
Well, yeah, you have people like Ron Clements and John Musker in the studio who did Treasure Planet and Little Mermaid and Aladdin and Moana. You want them to look at your movie, so we would always bring them in to look at Beauty and the Beast or whatever we were working on.
Oh, very cool.
And they would bring us in. So there was that kind of brain trust idea is a very Disney idea. So we would try to bring in those talents as much as we can, because why wouldn't you? So it was really collaborative. I think it's really different from the live action business in that way. Live action generally is about a script and a writer and then a director whose singular vision it is. And I really love the collaboration of animation more. It's about the best idea.
And so you're working on all this stuff. You're the producer. You're your guy. It's funny. You're going from one era to another, which is kind of interesting. Going from the pencil era, which was like, who's gonna this is the only way to do animation ever. Yeah. And then this little movie called Toy Story comes along and says, wait a second, we can actually do this now. Didn't you guys make a couple of CG movies like Chicken Little? Wasn't that Disney?
Yep.
Chicken
Little was.
Chicken Little. And what else did you guys do? I never saw Chicken Little. I don't know if anybody did. Was that a big hit?
It was not a big hit. No, it's a good movie. Mark Dindal directed it. Who did Cats Don't Dance, and he's a really good director, one of the funniest people I know. And he did Emperor's New Groove. And so after New Groove, he did Chicken Little. So yeah, we had our era of trying to get our feet underneath us to do
Meet
CG
the Robinsons.
movies.
Was that Disney too?
Meet the Robinsons was after that.
That's right.
So that era, for whatever reasons, most of which I can't talk about. People's change, chemistry changes.
Execs change.
You have like a 10-year good time in your life if you're lucky, and then that all goes away.
We're in the middle of our 10-year good time, Jason.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. We're at its peak.
Maybe
No,
4 years
you're
ago.
right now.
Have you worked on a CG movie? Because I know you've done stop motion, live action, 2D, a mix of the two.
I don't think I really have, to be honest. I don't know. It's not that it doesn't attract me. But this will sound awful, but it always felt like a marionette movie to me.
Sure.
Like you're building puppets and moving them around.
I can see.
And I really felt like I admired what Pixar was doing so much. I just thought, I can't do that. And I wasn't that interested in doing that. I love the hand-drawn stuff, and I'm not stuffy about that. I really adore the computer animated films and what you can do with it. I just never was attracted to it that much, and so I migrated more towards live action after that.
What do you think it is about 2D animation that has a charm about it that's different than 3D? Yeah. What do you think it is about 2D animation?
I don't know. Sometimes as people have said, it's like a handwritten letter. You know, you can see the hand of the artist. It's a little like clay animation or whatever, where you see a humanity to it. But I don't know that that's exactly true, because I see humanity in a lot of CG movies.
Oh yeah, the way they've mastered it now. And it's getting better all the time.
So, but I do think it's a graphic medium, and it's a medium of caricature. And because it's like one of my favorite movies is 101 Dalmatians. I feel like the story and the graphic design of that movie is a stunning mid-century marvel. So that's something that CG animation.
And the way they use models, like the little white models of the trucks and stuff like that.
It's brilliant. So that kind of hand-drawn aesthetic appeals to me a lot. And because it's a graphic medium, and I love graphic arts and just that whole sensibility.
And it's tactical. Like you could feel the animation, you could feel the paper it's on. So what was it like being at Disney and being surrounded by literal history? Like you can go into the morgue and see the hand-drawn animation from past films.
Well, first of all, you have no idea it's history, and secondly, you have no idea you're making any history, and none of us do. You know, if somebody had asked, well, just gosh, you must have known that Lion King was going to be a big hit that would be on Broadway. We used to laugh actually about that someday they would do like a Lion King ice show or something like that. It was so absurd.
Because you're just getting the work done.
You're just trying to work. I mean, you know how that is. You're just got your head down.
I got to get this done.
You're trying to make a paycheck and get your work done. And that's exactly what it was like. So we had a sense of history with the old guys when they were around. Now we're the old guys. And they were generous. They were with their teaching. They were really generous with us.
That's one of my favorite things from Waking Sleeping Beauty is the transition between, I don't know who described it, but it was like old men in sweaters into total Hollywood. What was that like, the transition? Because I find that so interesting.
That was a real slap in the face. Not in a punitive way, but in a kind of cold water splash in the face way. Because it was a very relaxed country club atmosphere, college campus. I mean, you know, you had walked around there and stuff. So very relaxed. It had a time clock. You punched in. You got your work done. You had to get a lot of work done before lunch because there was a lot of margaritas at lunchtime. Smoking. It's just an absolute time capsule from the 1950s.
Yeah, for sure.
So when Hollywood came in, which was kind of the Michael Eisner era, it was the best thing that could have happened because suddenly the reality of business kind of came into the marketplace. Nobody cared about animation that much, and then when it became apparent that animation could make money, and there's other factors too. I mean, people don't think about this, but there's no DGA affiliation, Directors Guild with animation, or Writers Guild affiliation, and very little SAG or Actors affiliation. So the economy of making an animated movie is actually what was really good. Yeah. They were reasonable to make. I don't know what. I think our budget on Roger Rabbit was maybe $4 or $6 million for the animation alone.
Wow. Amazing. And $1988. That's still not that much.
It's not that much. Yeah. So it was a real economical thing, and they started making money. And of course, the other thing that happened was the VHS kind of video revolution. Mm-hmm. So not only can you release the movie, but suddenly everybody wants one for their new VHS player, and that was a cash cow because it was free money. It was free money. You could just say, here's a movie. Not only The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, but here's Cinderella and here's Pinocchio. And
oh, by the way, now we're going to re-release it. It's its 30th anniversary.
Yes,
out of the vault.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what's really interesting about right now where we're sitting, because the whole streaming business is changing that yet again to the degree that the videotape business did. Yeah. Because now there's not going to be a vault anymore. So now you want to see Cinderella today or tomorrow or 3 years from now, you see Cinderella. And so that's really interesting, the dynamics of that.
Cool. So do you now? Right now, have you left Disney officially? I mean, you're out of Disney now.
I am. It's ironic because I'm doing more work for Disney now than I probably did when I was there.
Wow.
But about.
But you don't go to work in the studio anymore.
I don't. No, about 4 years ago or so, I was really ready for a new chapter in my life, and I ran animation for 6 months to a year, the year that we bought Pixar. The studio came to me and said, we need somebody to run animation because we're letting go all these executives that did run animation in the Chicken Little kind of era. And they needed kind of an interim head to run it all. So I knew everybody and knew all the players and knew John Lasseter and Ed Catmull really well. And that was a really good time. But after that was done and John and Ed came into the studio, which was a really positive thing for that studio, I just felt like, man, I could stick around and do this again, but it's a little bit like Groundhog Day. I've done this already. I'm not sure I can do it better. And I didn't just want to repeat my life again and again. And I had some, I started working on nature movies. I started the Disney Nature brand. So we did Earth and Chimpanzee and Lions and all that stuff. And that was great, working with the BBC Nature guys.
Are you outside? Are you out there getting the footage with these guys?
Not a chance.
No. No way.
And neither are they. It's funny.
It's all stock footage.
The producers, who are great people, Alistair Fothergill and Mark Lindsay, they live in Bristol, England, and they're BBC Nature folks that we hired to do these nature movies. And they go out in the field, but they hire these camera people that are true adventurers that go out and get bitten by snakes and eaten by crocodiles. Like the Chimpanzee guys were in the field for like 2 or 3 years filming chimps. And chimps don't do anything. And in a movie, they look like they do. They sleep, they mate, they throw their poop, and you can't use any of that in a movie. So,
well, you make a certain movie.
Certain movie,
There's like some kind of
I'll actually show you that later.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. But the movies were fun to make because I got involved in the story and the kind of editorial putting it all together. Like, what do you do with 70 hours of chimp butts?
Jace, come on, what do you do, Jace?
Back to you, Jace.
This is Hollywood, Jace.
3D, make it 3D.
3D, right? Yeah, that's the right answer.
Yes, thank you.
Right
so that was fun too because that was a story. I love story, and I just love storytelling.
So you guys just take the footage they give you and you go, what do we got? How to make a movie out of this? Okay.
But with that, I find it fascinating you went from animation to documentaries because they're the exact opposite. Like, you figure out the story before animation is close to being started, and documentaries, it's at the end, right?
It's reverse engineering. It's like putting a puzzle together without the picture on the box. You're just trying to figure it out. So we, and like later I found out, like Walt Disney kind of did the same thing. He came out of the World War II era and started making his his nature movies.
That's all they would show on Wonderful World of Disney, by the way. When I was growing up,
Really?
I wanted to watch, like, on Sunday nights. I'd watch Wonderful World of Disney. I wanted to see like Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Winnie the Pooh, and they would show those occasionally. But you always get like a nature movie.
Slappy the Beaver.
Yeah, exactly right. And they're like, well, all right. And I'm like, oh. But then when they would show, like, you know, some of the Jack Hanna cartoons or Winnie the Pooh or whatever, like, oh, now we're talking, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I love the nature movies. You guys should definitely try to make a few. Well, and even that went through a technological change, because now all of a sudden, like Roy Disney used to make nature movies, and he said we have like these little 5-minute magazines, and so after 5 minutes the film would run out, and it was really noisy, and so like a squirrel would run up to the camera and freeze for all the noise, and then when the film ran out, the squirrel would start singing and dancing, you know. So, but with digital photography, you could run for 3 hours and get some amazing things. So that was a great experience, and that got me kind of lit up about documentaries. And
this is in the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
in 2012 with Chimpanzee, you were a writer on that, right?
Yeah.
So how do you write a documentary after the fact, like with this hours of footage?
Oh man, this is gonna be a long interview. Out of necessity, and I didn't do it alone. I brought in Kirk Wise.
Oh, okay.
Who I adore, who worked with us and helped write, and a guy named Dave Reynolds, who wrote Emperor's New Groove, because he's funny. He used to write for Conan O'Brien. And I just thought this needs to be entertaining, otherwise it's going to be really dull. So we would sit in a room and literally go, okay, here's a sequence where the mom chimp takes the baby to the river and they make avocado toast or whatever it was. And you just come up with gags and ideas, and then try to find a narrator that's going to be able to deliver that.
Who narrated Chimpanzee?
It was either Samuel Jackson or Tim Allen.
Wasn't Morgan Freeman?
Maybe it was Tim Allen.
Tim Allen. I think it's Tim Allen. Yeah.
Right. So that was great, because then you could write for a certain voice.
Yeah.
So it was great, and I still do it. I still write a lot of IMAX movies for McGillivray Freeman and for Disney too. So I just really have loved that. So, but being more of an independent producer was important to me. So the last 5 years, I've had my own studio. I moved off the lot, which I had been on for 35 years, and have my own place, and so it's a little bit selfish. I also felt, just with the dynamics of the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, there were some social issues I wanted to address with my filmmaking, and I thought the world doesn't need another Don Hahn cartoon. I could really use my skills to make documentaries and give a voice to people that don't have a voice.
Wow, nice.
And so however that manifests itself, like I just finished a movie about Howard Ashman. I don't know, but I just love that aspect of it. I also love working small. You know, we have Stephen and Lori, my producer, and you can make a documentary with 5 people, and that challenge is really terrifying but wonderful.
No, it's true, and it's a lot easier to manage. Not as many people to answer to, I would imagine. All produced by you, all independently.
Yeah, so far.
Very cool.
So far, yeah. It's not that I wouldn't take on a partner or a studio or whatever, but I really wanted it to be personal. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to try to do that. So.
You're being in a position to be able to do that. It's really awesome.
I'm really lucky.
So if we could ask, if you can reveal anything, what's coming up next? Anything we can talk about that you want to talk about?
Wow, the Disney streaming service is fantastic. I mean, Warner Brothers has one too, and many studios.
Disney Plus,
which is launching in November. I'm working on, which has been announced, a film for Epcot, for the French Pavilion at Epcot, which is fun. I love it. I mean, I think probably first I was always a Disneyland geek, and like all of us grew up there. So being able to work with the Imagineering guys is like a dream.
Oh my gosh, it must be so cool.
It's great. And then I've done a documentary about the Gamble House, which is Doc Brown's house from Back to the Future. We work with the Rose Bowl a lot to do some historic documentaries. I love it. I love the independence. I love working with Disney still, and they've been great to me. I have to say, working for any company is challenging. I can't say Disney was perfect, and it never has been. You talk to the old guys, and they were...
No company's perfect.
No company's perfect. But by and large, their aesthetic and their approach to entertainment has always fit me really well. And in fact, I discovered a few years ago, I went to Paramount after I left Disney and helped them set up their animation division. And I discovered I never want to work in the movie business. I just want to work at Disney. And so that sounds very... Amazing. Yeah, and I didn't know that about myself, but it's really that aesthetic and that kind of sensibility that appeals to me.
Is that why you have an executive producer credit on Wonder Park? Is that the Paramount connection?
Yeah.
So what was that, the beginnings of Paramount Animation?
I had several friends over there, especially Bob Bacon, who was one of the executives at Disney Animation, and he asked me if I could come over and help them get their first movie up and running, and that is Wonder Park. And I had a really good time. I brought in Rick Heinrichs, who is Tim Burton's production designer. Rick is a production designer on everything from Dumbo to Nightmare Before Christmas. And we set up shop, and he got a little team of 30 artists, and just started jamming on that movie.
They were starting to work on that. They were starting to work on that at Nickelodeon right around the time I was leaving. Like, it was like February 2018. They were starting to come in. Yeah, so
because they were doing SpongeBob stuff, and at the same time. So they, they're off and running now, but that was before Paramount really had an animation division, because they had just lost DreamWorks as a distribution deal. So a lot of dynamics in the business, largely because it makes a lot of money. The studios really love it, and these animated movies are evergreen, because you can look at a movie you can still look at Lion King from 1994, so it's 25 years ago this year, and you can still watch it. It doesn't age. The actors don't age. The actors don't get into trouble with the law. You know,
the story's timeless.
So that's the other thing I love about it.
And there's always kids being born that want to watch cartoons.
Yeah, God bless them.
So there you go.
But what is it about Disney, the environment inside creating movies, that's different from other studios then?
Would you know? You've never been to another studio, or a little bit?
I'm not sure I do know completely. Like right now, I have a lot of friends that work at Warner Brothers, and they have a really good environment happening. But they're all Disney people. Alison Abadi runs their animation department. She produced all these amazing stop-motion movies with Tim Burton and Wes Anderson. So they have a similar collaborative environment. I think that's it. You check your ego at the door. You come in. Yes, the director has to tell the story, and that's what we're all there to do. But it's collaborative, and it's not as ego-driven sometimes as other things. I think it's very hard to put a live-action model onto animation, and that's where a lot of studios have failed and gone wrong. Where they say, let's, we're going to buy this writer, and this writer is going to write a script, and then we're going to storyboard the script, and we'll make it. Doesn't work in animation. I'm sorry, because the leap from a printed word on the page to a visual image on the screen is huge in any medium, but especially in animation. So I think that lesson's starting to be learned, because there's enough experience now in the animation industry where people are understanding that and investing more in visual development artists and storyboard artists and the people that really make the movies.
So as we wrap up here, let's just ask a couple more questions. Like, dream project that you'd want to work on? Or something you'd want to do if you could?
My own rib restaurant. No, I love documentaries. I'd love to find a long-form documentary, and I actually have thought about this for PBS, because I'm on the board of PBS out here, of doing one about the animation industry, like Termite Terrace and the genesis of animation in Hollywood.
I'd love to. I as an animation nerd myself, I'd love to see something.
Yeah, well, you should be in it, actually. But that, like, how did that start, and what was the competition between UPA and Disney, and why did all those artists leave after the strike to go found UPA, and how did that turn into Warner Brothers?
Walter Lantz was in there.
Walter Lantz, and everybody came through Disney, but how did that blow up? And so that how did animation get from there to this multi-billion-dollar business that it is? That's just something that interests me.
That's very cool. Very cool.
So that kind of thing.
I'm curious. You've worked with so many amazing people, like story people like Joe Ranft, John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Tim Burton, so many amazing creative people, Steven Spielberg, and you've studied Walt Disney.
Steven who?
Spielberg. He's worked on some tiny movie.
Okay, sorry.
You guys may have not have heard of Back to the Future type of thing.
I hadn't heard of that.
And you've also studied Walt Disney through documentaries and books and things. So who have you worked with that's most similar to Walt Disney?
Wow.
Other than us two.
You guys are given, because you're sitting here on my sofa. It's funny. There's a lot of people that would claim that throne,
or even yourself, honestly.
I know my limitations. Walt was really interesting, and what I admire about him is he was brilliant at finding and using talent. And he would, if he were sitting here, I think he would say this. And I knew and talked to his daughter a lot, and Ron Miller a lot, who knew him. He was extremely persistent. There was no such thing as no. If he wanted to do something, he just knew it could be done, and he'd figure out how to do it with the money and the talent. But his organization was his strong point, because he couldn't draw as well as anybody. He couldn't design theme parks as well as anybody, but he had this imagination and knew who could execute it. He knew he could take Mark Davis out of animation and stick him in Imagineering, and then suddenly it's not the theme park business anymore; it's the storytelling business. So you literally go from little boat rides and things. Now there's Pirates of the Caribbean, and there's these drawings that Mark did for the Haunted Mansion, and so he's able to move his talents around, and that Claude Coates, is one of the layout guys, and to be able to use those people in all these different mediums.
I'd probably say maybe Spielberg's up there with Disney in that sense. Everybody wants to be Walt, no one can be, but I mean, Spielberg's probably done as much as Walt has. But I mean, I remember one time I was thinking, I bet Walt Disney has his name on more physical items in the world than anybody else does, because any little Donald Duck figure,
it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's just all over the place.
He's a really savvy businessman, and his brother was too, and that's a little bit the era. So when television hatched, he was the first one into it. But it's like now, like social media and the internet. It's like what you guys are doing. You have your own show. Well, that's what Walt was doing. But Spielberg's great. Richard Williams is a creative genius on the drawing board, in business and other things. Maybe not so much. I have to say Katzenberg. In fact, Joe Grant, who worked really closely with Walt and wrote Dumbo and Lady and the Tramp and all those movies, he said, there's a little bit of Walt in Katzenberg. His persistence, his drive, his taste wasn't always right on, but he knew how to pull good people in. He knew who talented people were, and he had this persistence about him. So I think that there's a little bit of that in Jeffrey.
Yeah, very cool.
With Jeffrey, I think it was Jeffrey in Beauty and the Beast. He was the one who said that the production needed to start over, right? Was that him?
On every movie.
Every movie?
Gotta start over.
I remember in Awakening Sleeping Beauty, you said he's not going to make a start over, and then he did. The production started over. But now that's a really common occurrence, I feel like, in animated movies with Toy Story, Incredibles, Monsters Inc. They always start, and then they're like, nope, we got to start from scratch again.
Yeah, man, you just don't want to be the first director on an animated feature.
Yeah, really.
Because that was almost a cliche after a while. You'd go on the field trip, like you were making Mulan. Yeah. You'd travel to China, or you'd be on Beauty and the Beast. You'd go to the Loire Valley and look at chateaus, and then get fired off the movie. I mean, it was with every movie. Hopefully that doesn't happen as much anymore. Was
that because of Katzenberg? Was he the one who...
Well, he was the one that had the...
final say.
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
I was going to say balls, but the final say to be able to... in a locomotive. So anyway.
Yes, of course.
But he had the wherewithal to be able to change that and be brave enough to do it.
Yeah.
It's hard to call a director in and say, it's not working out. It's better for both of us if we part company. But he was brave enough to do that. And inevitably on every show, the movie got a lot better fast. Like Kirk and Gary on Beauty and the Beast, that was a Battlefield promotion. They had never directed a feature before. They were doing a little show for Epcot called Cranium Command. And it was a pre-show. Like Jerry Reese was doing the main show, but they were doing the pre-show, and it was brilliant. And we said, let's give them a try. And we didn't even call them directors. We said, you're kind of temporary directors. But on that story crew, we had Brenda Chapman, Kevin Lima designed characters. We had Roger Allers. We had Kelly Asbury. I mean, these people who are all the leaders of animation right now were on that movie. So that's
all
my job.
It's so funny. A lot of these people you mentioned, we were all in the same classes at Cal. Like that early 80s group of people. It's so wild.
You guys were in the right place at the right time, and I absolutely include you in that, because there was this amazing time of opportunity and a real handoff from the old generation, from like the Hanna-Barbera guys or Filmation or whatever, just looked to you. And then there were places like Nickelodeon you could go to that were anxious to get a new voice. And the same was true with Disney. So those early generations at Cal Arts, another Walt Disney idea.
Exactly.
He invested in talent a lot. I mean, even back in, I'm going on here, but even back when they started doing Snow White, he was spending $1 million a year during the Depression on training alone. And he was giving that to Chenard. He was driving his people down there. Art Babbitt would have drawing classes at his house on the weekend. They brought in animals for Bambi. They invested in their artists, and nobody had ever done that before. And I think to this day, Disney Animation, certainly Pixar, Warner, some of the studios around are doing that as well.
I mean, just to make an animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, to even try that back then.
Nuts.
And then to make it good and make people want to see it. I mean, to achieve that back then.
Yeah.
Just think about the people that said no to him.
And again, his ability to find the people to do it. Because if you look at early shorts where they were building up to it, there's great ones like The Old Mill, but there's like Goddess of Spring where there's real rubber hosy kind of characters for Snow White.
The Old Mill, I had a copy of that when I was a kid. I bought a Super 8 version. I'd watch it in my bathroom.
It's great.
Sounds weird. It was the darkest room of my house.
Yeah, yeah.
But just the multiplane in that alone.
It's brilliant.
It's gorgeous.
So
Not a word of dialogue spoken in that.
Wow, amazing.
Nope.
Amazing.
Well, it's like Bambi. There's 700 words of dialogue in Bambi.
Really.
Yeah. So he would invest in technology. He was a technology geek. Invest in people and be able to pull somebody like Freddie Moore into the studio that revolutionized the look of Disney. And he knew it. And said, okay, take a crack at Mickey Mouse, take a crack at, whatever. And then when they got to the 50s, he brought in these mid-century artists like Tee and all your teachers.
Bob Wimquist and those
Bob
guys.
Wimquist, Tom Oreb, Walt Paragoy, all these guys that are my mid-century idols to rejuvenate the studio again. So amazing guy.
Well, Don, you have any more questions?
Oh, I got a bunch more. But
We
going,
have to end eventually.
I know.
We have to stop eventually.
Going back to Beauty and the Beast,
I don't want to stop.
That was the first animated movie that was nominated for Best Picture, correct? Yeah, and that was you. Like, you were the one nominated. It was your name on it.
It was, yeah.
And you accepted the Golden Globe for Beauty and the Beast. So what was
it's
it?
right behind me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it just stood out right there. Wow, it's amazing. Wow, there we go.
That's cool.
But leading up to that award season, was it anticipated that Beauty and the Beast would be an awards contender?
Well, it was very deliberate. It wasn't like, oh gosh, we had no idea.
Yeah.
And again, I go back to Katzenberg. He's a clever guy. He and several other people in the marketing department felt like for animation to really coexist in the same field as live action, we had to educate the audience.
Yeah.
So the same year Beauty and the Beast came out, we did a show at the Whitney Museum in New York with animation art. We did coffee table books about animation art. We did tours with Glenn Keane and people that could talk about the craft and the Beast and how they did it. We did a showing of the unfinished version of Beauty and the Beast at the New York Film Festival.
Oh my gosh.
Never been done before. Oh. So there was this very calculated idea to expose animation and the vocabulary of animation to the audience. And that was brilliant because that had echoes even to today. And that's what exposed it to the Academy and kind of got us that nomination.
Wow, amazing. Now, have you guys won in the Academy? Have you yourself won an Academy Award?
No, I never have. Because there wasn't a category.
I haven't either, so just,
Well, we should work on something.
We
could probably spend some money. No, there was never a category for animation up until after Beauty and the Beast. So now there's a separate category for Best Animated Film, which is terrific. But I haven't been honored with that yet, and that's cool. I when I see people win those Oscars now, like Pete Docter and the guys that did Big Hero 6, and he's so happy because they're
all the guys that worked on all the Pixar stuff.
They're brilliant filmmakers. Brad Bird, they're just, to me, those guys, the Pete Docters and Brad Birds of the world, and Kurt and Gary and all the people we're talking about are really the kind of modern geniuses of animation. Brenda Chapman,
Now, what's it like to revisit the projects that you worked with at Disney on live action films? Even though you did Maleficent as well, which live action Sleeping Beauty.
I actually liked Maleficent a lot. It was really
awesome.
Really well done. And now Lion King is out, the live action Lion King.
I have heard that.
Yes. For the rumor.
You produced that. You produced on that.
I have to be honest. It's really weird. Maleficent, not so much, because I certainly didn't work on it, and I loved Mark Davis came up with that character. It's not in the original fairy tale. And I had developed it for a while as an animated film, and then Angelina Jolie changed it all. Like when Angelina Jolie calls up and wants to do a film with you, you have to say yes. And it was such perfect casting. And there's a new one coming out. There's Maleficent 2 coming out. So that got that movie going. Lion King is the kind of next step beyond Jon Favreau's Jungle Book in terms of using the computer to animate in photorealistic ways. And it's kind of great because I can remember when Polar Express came out, and there was that kind of, it was great, but it was Uncanny Valley, humans, strong attempt, and loved it.
Same with Beowulf.
These Bob Zemeckis movies, and Bob is fearless about technology. But Lion King, I think, starts anew. If you're in animation, you'd be very wise to pay attention to Lion King. And I don't say that to make myself sound important, but it's really Jon Favreau and his crew, because it's a virtual reality filmmaking process. So you go visit the set at Lion King and you put on goggles, and there's Pride Rock, and there's the lions walking around.
Wow.
And John would walk over and say, well, you take the camera, Don, and you see this little virtual camera coming at you, and you pick it up with your controllers, and you move over and you fly the camera around, and you fly up to the top of Pride Rock, and you have complete mobility everywhere.
And you're in an empty stage?
Yeah, it's in a black box theater almost in
Amazing.
Playa Vista. The animation is all rig animated, so there's no motion capture in Lion King, which is astounding because it's really good. Those animators did a great job. So the animation's in cycles, and so you see it cycle, and you see Simba run up and push his dad and say, wake up, Dad, wake up. And you can go over and shoot a close-up, you can shoot a long shot, you can shoot a down shot, whatever you want, and editorial's right next door, so that data goes right next door, and you see a low-res version of it cut into the reel and see if it works, and then it goes off and gets rendered. So the process and the ability of game engines to render stuff really quickly is amazing now, and just changes everything.
And there's a big debate online whether Lion King, the 2019 version, is live action or animated. So being a part of it, what would you call it?
Well, using the vernacular of the last 100 years, it's animated.
Yeah, right?
There's no question. But I think it's right to talk about it, what it is, because it is, some people have called it like virtual cinematography and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The animators who worked on it killed themselves, and they are, honest to God, grown-up animators. So it's an animated film. But I think it's right to debate it and talk about what it is, because it's so different.
Well, then, I think this is the first animated movie remade as an animated movie, right? I can't think of any other movie that's similar.
It's a remake, yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
interesting.
right?
You might be right.
I've never thought of that. Thank God you're here.
Give him the,
Yes, thank you.
Give him the Golden Globe.
Yeah,
You want
yeah,
that? You got that?
I will.
Yeah, yes.
That's a reward.
Yes.
I have some pizza. If you like.
I'll take it.
Okay, listen.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you one more question for Don Hahn.
Oh,
This is
no.
the last
Wait.
question.
If we're getting
We
one
have
more.
to let Don Hahn go back about his Don
This
Hahn.
is so-
He's got Don Hahn stuff to do.
I'm so tired.
I have
and
to
hungry.
choose then.
Please,
Wait.
let me go.
Let me go.
Okay.
I'll give you what you want. You have one question.
I'm okay.
Drum roll.
I'll go
Wait,
with
there's
this.
There's a drum roll.
I'm fascinated about, this isn't really quite, overall, the Gong Show at Disney.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by that. Can you explain that to the audience, what that was?
For those of your viewers who don't remember, Chuck Barris had a TV show called The Gong Show.
I remember that
Yeah.
very well.
People, yes, it was weird. People would come out and
Gene,
Yeah.
the dancing machine.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was like a tacky version of America's Got Talent.
Yes,
So
yes.
people would come out and perform, and if they were horrible, they could get gonged.
Yeah.
So this was a Katzenberg, Michael Eisner thing, and so there was a panel of judges, which is Katzenberg. Peter,
This was at the studio.
at the studio,
Okay.
at the building you were in.
Yes.
Peter Schneider, those guys sit at a table, and you had 3 minutes. So Mike Gabriel comes in. Mike Gabriel says, it's West Side Story meets Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas, and he holds up a drawing. And it's like, great, we're making it.
that quick?
Wow.
Yeah, and then there'd be like 100 other ones
I
that
was
you
a
wouldn't.
live-action reference model in Pocahontas.
Were you really?
I was John Smith and the Indian Coco. I was
can
her
totally
Indian-
see that.
I was actually cast as an actor. I was trying to be an actor at the time, and I went in for the audition for John Pomeroy, and became a live action.
How funny.
Mike Gabriel. How was Mike, by the way?
Mike's great. Has been at Disney all this time. He's, oh man, talk about a great designer and a great animator.
Yeah, what a super great guy. This was back in the 90s, I remember.
Yeah. So you could pitch. Little Mermaid came up, and it was gonged. It was like, no, we're not going to make that.
Wow.
Because the studio had just done Splash.
And they had a gong.
And they had a gong.
Well, who was allowed to pitch? Who were
Anybody.
anyone in the studio?
Janitor, receptionist.
Did janitors and receptionists?
Yeah, within animation, commissary workers,
That's awesome.
in-betweeners, it didn't matter. And some good ideas came out of it. So
awesome.
it was very smart because it allowed people to vent their creative angst that they may not get doing in-betweens all day long. That's a very focused, frustrating job.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it made you feel like you were heard, because you were. To have executives who are running a corporation like that and have Roy Disney sit there and to give you his time and listen to these things, it was a really good thing.
Very cool.
Amazing.
Okay, no more questions. Okay, we have to let this man go.
It's
He has to
hard.
go
I'm
do
exhausted.
something.
I'm
sorry.
Lay down.
Well, Don, thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
Thank
you
you.
guys are great, and it's so good to have you
appreciate
here.
it.
It's a real
thank
pleasure.
you. We've only taken a couple things that you haven't noticed, so you won't.
Yeah.
notice it.
That's okay. I'm quite elderly. Don't see them gone anyway.
I'm
so.
frail, and
Yeah.
I can't get around.
We
to
put
stuff.
horse blinders on you. I don't know if you noticed.
No, just bring my walker back. And I'll be fine.
Okay, good. All right, guys, this has been Butch and Jace and the amazing Don Hahn. Thank you so much, and roll the theme music.